Hello and welcome to the 2025 State of Real Estate. I'm Scott Perryman with the Porter Group. We got a big topic on our hands. And this is actually a redo of a video that we shot in 2022. Now, at the time, that video was due to unprecedented time of COVID pricing, interest rates, and so on, followed by unprecedented time of rates doubling within 6 months in the year 2022. And now we look back and we've had 3 years of rate consistency between 6% and up to 7.5% on our 30-year fixed rate mortgages. So that 3 years of rate consistency has had an opportunity to take its effect on the market. And what we want to do with this state of real estate is kind of look at the real estate market from a much wider lens. Last time we called it a 30,000 foot perspective. So whereas on the quarterly and annual basis, we're kind of a little bit closer to the market, I want to talk about big industry driving trends and themes that we can recognize based on interest rates, inventory, and then I've got a case study that is one property that sold in 2022 and now sold in 2025 that I think very perfectly articulates where is the 2025 state of real estate. So, big topic. I've got my whiteboard here to try and make some notes, and we'll get started right away. All right, so we too have come a long way in 2025, and look at this. All right. How fun is that? Okay, so you may remember this chart, or hopefully you went back and looked at our 2022 State of Real Estate video, because had a lot of positive responses to that. And this visual aid here is going to help us have a great conversation about the real estate market from a large angle lens. So how this works is that we've got negative inventory here. So as negative inventory gets up here at insane levels, which is what we saw in 2022, or excuse me, in 2021, we got down to 2 weeks of inventory. And then on this side, as interest rates get higher and higher, right? We were at 2.75% in 2021. And as rates did that climbing that we illustrated in the 2022 state of real estate, we can use this to show you how prices change over time. So in 2021, we had 2 weeks of inventory because interest rates were insane. Both of those are insane numbers. And then in 2022, remember, we doubled, right? We went from 3 to 6 and even on upwards to 7, maybe 7.25 in the year 2022, which would still be kind of a premium interest rate. The reason I say that is that a market rate and a market inventory would lead to pricing being kind of even, right? So the 50-year average for a 30-year mortgage is around 7.7%. So while we talk about rates doubling and interest rates are high and the real estate market is bleeding inventory, keep in mind that 7.7 is the 50-year average for a 30-year fixed rate mortgage. All right. And we're saying that in the 3 years of 2022 to 2025, we have been between 6 and 7%. We did get up to 7.75, things like this, but for 3 years, we've had rate consistency in the 6 to 7% range. So this is a 2021 number. By 2022, we ended with what I would still call is insane low inventory of 1.3 months. So while rates doubled, we were still coming out of a very feast or famine type of inventory environment, and therefore we still had insane low rates of inventory. Now I'm going to mark for you today. Today we are at 4.25. 4 months and a quarter of monthly inventory. So that's 6 months would be a balanced market, right? 6 months would be right here. And today we're at 4.25%, sometimes 4.5%, just kind of depending on the seasonality. But this is how over the course of 3 years, with rates in the 6 to 7% range, 2 weeks became 1.3 months, became today 4.25 months of inventory. That's very close to a balanced market. And we said then, and we maintain today, that in order to get, into like a 7+ months inventory environment, probably not going to get there because of the decades-long underbuilding that came post 2008, and then continuing into this post-COVID era, we're still seeing underbuilding to meet housing supply. So while the market is allowing inventory to get here to 4 and approaching 6 months, right? You can see the trajectory to get into this bargain level area where prices really come down. It's going to take something else. Maybe rates go even higher, something like that, but we're still in a market level pricing. And here's what that has done to prices over these 3 years. So in 2021 to 2022, when rates doubled and we got here and ultimately to 7.25%, the appreciation 21 to 22 was still really, really high at 9%. So it's a deceleration, yes, from pandemic level appreciation, but still a lot of appreciation over the course of the year when rates doubled at a pace they had never doubled before. Then 2023 versus 2022 was much more mild. We saw 2.9% increase in 2.9% when rates got into the 6 and 7% in the year 2023. The next year, actually, 2024 versus 2023, prices actually came downward. Not a lot, but still 1.7%. So this is how things balance and moderate. We went from 9, now very modest appreciation at 3%, and then actually down in the year 2024. Now in 2025, year to date, closing quarter 3, but year to date, prices are up just a little bit at around 2% average appreciation compared to last year. So using our grid here and talking about insanely low inventory, ending the year 2022 with still kind of insanely low inventory, under 2 months, as rates got more to a market level, it has allowed more like market level supply, right? The inventory is more like market level at 4.25, and that is how prices have moderated. So over these 3 years of rate consistency, now you're getting the picture on this wide angle lens view of real estate and how it's affected pricing. Because I do believe that that is the one catalyst that will determine where we go in our future. If rates continue to come down, great, we might see some more appreciation because the inventory will then go down. But if rates go up, we might get into this bargain level pricing territory and we'll see some depreciation in our housing market. So with that, I now want to turn our attention to a case study. This is a property that sold in 2022 and then again in this year, 2025, because I think, again, it can very well articulate the things that are going on in this interest rate and inventory environment. So give me 1 second. I'm going to chart that out and stay tuned. Okay, we're back. This is the case study for one particular property that sold in 2022 and then again this year in 2025, because I think it's a really good example of just how far we've come in the real estate market and how the market itself shows up very differently at the transaction level. So what we have here is the list date from that time, 6/26. This year it listed on 7/1, virtually the same as far as seasonality and things like this is concerned. It went under contract then in 2 days with multiple offers, right? Because 1.3 months of inventory is still not a lot of inventory, sold in 2 days with multiple offers. This year, now that we have 4 months of inventory, 29 days is not a long time on market, but it is still vastly different than it was in 2022. It closed on 9/3, so a long close date, which means the sellers probably got to pick that. And then this year closed on 8/20, right? So a quicker closing date, which is, tough to get out, but still virtually the same in terms of seasonality. Okay, and then in 2022, the asking price was $825,000. As I mentioned, multiple offers. It sold way over at $853,000. So then in 2025, $875 was their asking price. Eventually, because of 29 days on market, fewer buyers in the market, they sold under asking at $860,000, and they paid $2,000 in seller concessions. So you can see just how different the real estate transaction was if we look at this one particular property, and kind of in a vacuum. Now, that's the thing that we've got to appreciate here, is that this doesn't happen in a vacuum, right? There could be relocation involved. In fact, there was with this particular property, and you don't know. Maybe he's getting a signing bonus to take a new job, and that's going to be okay as far as taking a loss on the house and this sort of thing. But I think in order to understand the state of real estate, I want to point out a few more things about, in a vacuum, how this person takes their finances into the buying market this year versus then. So one thing that you've got to consider is that on the way in, you're going to have closing costs. Loans, tax impounds, these kinds of things have closing costs, probably at this price somewhere in the neighborhood of, let's call it $18,000, maybe $20,000 in closing costs in the year 2022. Now, when you're selling a home and you've got real estate fees and this sort of thing, you could probably even say that you're on the upside of $60,000 in closing costs. Okay, so this real estate transaction, adding the two together, we've got some cost of sales in the neighborhood of $80,000 between selling it and purchasing it in 3 years' time. So here's another interesting factoid when we talk about rates getting into that 6% range. And by September of 2022, which is when they closed, we were at 6% on our 30-year fixed rate average. So 6% mortgage. And again, it's in a vacuum. Let's assume they paid the minimum. If you took the amortization schedule and you took what they financed in 2022 at 6% after 3 years of mortgage payments, they're only going to have gained about $25,000 in equity just through debt pay down, assuming they paid the minimum. Okay. Now, a lot of times we're counting on appreciation as well, but as you can see, $853 is where they bought it. $860 minus $2,000 is basically $858, right? $858 minus $853 is only $5K appreciation. Okay, so you put those two together and we've got $30K equity. Again, in a vacuum, about $30,000 worth of equity, and the cost of sale on the purchase and the close being $80K, that means we've got $50K less in our new buying environment, right? So that, to me, in a vacuum, can articulate how interest rates affect what you're able to gain in equity, how inventory can affect what you're able to sell for when demand is a little bit lower because of increased inventory. And then for this one particular person, you can see how their personal finances would be affected as they enter the buying market. Okay, that concludes our 2025 State of Real Estate. The reason I wanted to put this video together is that the month of September is when rates in 2022 hit the 6% mark. And this year, 2025, marks 3 years of rate consistency between 6 and 7%. Now, a personal confession also. I actually made an offer on that house that we did as our case study in 2022. And so it was very interesting for me to see it come back on the market this year. And then once it closed, to see the coincidences in the time that it was listed, to see how it fared on the market. And the transaction was so different. There were just so many things that showed up that I could use that as a case study to bring to you guys the 2025 state of real estate. Hopefully now you can understand how interest rates being at 6 and 7% is kind of a market level interest rate, which has allowed inventory to get to more like a market level 4 to 6 months, which has meant that prices have stabilized at the kind of 2 to 3% year over year appreciation. And then you can kind of understand how the transaction is affected when that particular buyer may have been a bit of a hole on just the real estate transaction by the amount of about $50,000. So it's a great video that I've gotten a lot of positive feedback on, and I hope that you enjoyed today. If you have questions about your options or about something you've seen in the real estate market that might be a little bit different, please call me. I'd love to help. My name is Scott Perryman with the Porter Group. You can reach me at 901-497-5615. Take care.